Welcome to Explore, Explain. This is a long-form video and podcast series sharing conversations with data visualization designers and developers from around the world. Each episode explores the detailed hidden thinking behind a single project or a series of related works to explain the what, the why, and the how of the design process. So let's jump in to today's episode with your host, Andy Kirk.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Explore, Explain. In today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome two special guests, stellar talents. I have Nicola Rennie and Ansgar Wolsing. It's great to see you both and welcome you both to the show. Thank you ever so much for your time this morning. We'll get on to the topic of today's episode shortly, but maybe for the benefit of the viewers and the listeners especially, could I ask you to introduce yourselves, starting with Nicola?
Hello, I'm Nicola Rennie. I'm a data visualization specialist. My background is in statistics, operational research, and data science, but I got into visualization about 5 years ago.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicola. Ansgar?
Hi, my name is Ansgar Wolsing, and I work as the principal data analytics consultant at Kaiser X Labs, which is a subsidiary of Allianz Insurance Group in Germany. I also work as a independent data visualization instructor where I teach students about data visualization, data storytelling. Very happy to be here on the podcast today.
And my pleasure as well. Thank you so much. So today's episode is a little bit of a switch to the normal format. We're going to look at a central topic, which is the 30-day map challenge, which is this annual campaign taking place every November. I think it's always been November. And the idea is that over the course of the month, every day, people will publish a map, a thematic map based on some daily theme, some daily challenge. And you two have been very much involved in this over the years, but especially this year, I thought your works were outstanding. And so I thought I need to do an episode about this challenge. Only two names could possibly come to the fore of my mind. And what we're going to do is going to look at a selection, not every one, of course, otherwise we'll be here for hours, but a selection of your works across those 30-day themes. And prior to the recording, we've worked together to kind of curate a list that gives a nice spread, one or two overlaps, but a nice spread of different methods. Just to sort of quickly go through the approach that you've taken, the kind of the hidden thinking that you went through and the choices that you made around these challenges. But I guess my first question about this is just to sort of set the scene for the 30-day map challenge. So I believe it started in 2019, launched by Topi Tukhanov. And it's something that I've always looked on admiringly from afar, but with a certain degree of hesitation to take part. I think personally that mapping is my weakest thing. Maybe 2026 will be the year that I get into it, but so far I look at these works and it's such an overwhelming, wonderful repertoire of talented people creating so many different solutions. I'll come to you first, Ansgar, on this one. When did you first get involved in the 30-day map challenge, and why, I suppose, is another question.
Yeah, so I think I consumed it passively when it started in 2019. And I first joined in 2021. I've always been fascinated with maps from very early on, but probably never had the tools to really kind of create this kind of stuff. So I was observing what others did and was impressed, and I also learned what others are using as a tool. So I typically use R as as my language of choice to do these maps based on code, and I learned from others what they are using. I noticed, okay, it isn't too hard. So I tried to join in 21, and yeah, that was kind of my opportunity to learn about creating maps. Actually, because I mean, I've been creating maps before, but then it was in like tools that kind of restricted me, at least as I felt. And all of the different stuff that is possible in R helped me to do stuff and learn new stuff, which is kind of my main motivation until today, to participate in the challenge and also learn from what others have been creating. Like Nicola, your creative and very amazing work this year and the years before.
Absolutely. And I guess the same question to yourself, Nicola. What was the sort of motivation for yourself to get involved?
I think I had a very similar motivation, and I think 2021 was the first year that I participated as well. And I think during that year, I wanted to explore different data sets, different tools, and sort of have no restrictions on the types of
Mm,
things you could make. And it doesn't matter if it works.
yeah,
It's a really sort of, there's no limitations, no restrictions. If it's terrible, you don't have to share it.
that's the thing.
It's a really nice space to learn without any pressure. Um, and yeah, so I took part in a few different visualization challenges during 2021, and the 30-day map challenge was one of them. And like Ansgar, I probably didn't make as many maps as other types of charts. It was a nice way to
Mm.
sort of focus on one chart type and really learn about that in a lot more detail.
I think you're right. I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, I said about my own hesitation to get involved. You don't have to put your work out there. You can do it maybe as a shadow activity and just sort of take part maybe 1 year, then the year after maybe jump in. But it's a very, as these things tend to be in data viz, it's a lovely community wrapped around it, very supportive, very kind of encouraging. And that sense of inspiration you get from others is, of course, a wonderful byproduct of it. But I think what you mentioned there, Nicholas, strikes a chord with me, which is something I often sort of espouse and tell other people trying to get into data viz more broadly, which is to use the practice opportunity to work out how to make all these different, in this case, maps, but usually different charts. And once you've got the sort of playbook of how to make a chart type, thereafter the sort of barrier to expressing your data in that way becomes much lower, much reduced. And you therefore focus more on the stories and maybe the design flourishes rather than how do I make this thing. So I think that sense of practice is a wonderful opportunity that this gives you. And as I said, it's 30 days, 30 different challenges of different themes, from things as simple as points or lines, right the way through to matters around accessibility, topics around urban, fire, air. So there's all sorts of different ways to express yourself with this, which is something that I really appreciate it as a thing. And it's, unless I'm mistaken, it's been the same structure of themes from the start, possibly. I don't know if there's been some tweaks along the way, but I think it's been fairly consistent. The different themes are they are different from one day to the next. Now, you've not designed this challenge, but from your perspective, I'll come to you first on this, Nicola. Is there a sense that the daily challenges are to take you from one to another quite different approaches? Or are there sort of general themes that you sort of follow that kind of take you on certain kind of threads of methods or threads of topics? Or is it just a very distinct daily challenge each time?
I think it depends on what your aims are for the
Right.
challenge. So in previous years, I haven't done every day. I've
Yeah.
done sort of a day here and there, and then it's a lot more distinct. This year I did all 30 days, and if you have committed to doing all 30 days, a little bit of planning in advance is usually helpful. So you start to pick out those themes of, I could use this data set multiple
Right.
times and look at it from different angles, or I could use the same sort of code or functions
I see.
multiple times, just to save my own sanity and the amount of time it would take to do all 30 days.
That's it.
So I think you can interpret it as very distinct things, but if you want to do 30 very distinct things, that might take quite a lot of time. So trying to look at the prompts
Yeah.
in advance before November begins and sort of say,
Yeah.
okay, these are the things that I could do multiple times or look at the same data from different angles.
And from your point of view, Ansgar, I guess you do the same sort of preparation, but do you ever, I don't know, set yourself artificial constraints such as, I will take part in this if I can do it within, let's say, 1 hour per day, or if I can just do all the maps based on some central consistent data set? Do you approach it in that way, or do you just say, right, each day is its own day and we'll see how it works out?
Yeah, I should say that I have no background in geography or cartography or something like that. So the techniques and the methods are already quite challenging for me. So I thought when I first joined in 21, okay, I use a theme that is maybe helping me to be able to learn the mapping stuff on the one hand, but not be too much into getting domain knowledge about the topic. So I live in Cologne, and I just decided, okay, I will try to make all of the maps that I am able to do about topics that relate to Cologne. So I kind of am around and maybe have some subject matter expertise, so to say. Started very well. I think the first challenge, the first was points. So place something on a map, which was really kind of easy, and it has been kind of a staple, I think, prompt in all of these years. It's always, I guess, starting with points as the theme. And then came day 2, and it was lines, and I was wondering, wow, my idea of having kind of one theme didn't work out. And then I thought, okay, there's a large river flowing through Cologne, so maybe I just draw a line.
That's
and
the line.
the exact. It's the River Rhine basically, and how it starts in Switzerland and then goes up and finally crosses Cologne. So that was kind of. And then I picked up the theme again and focused on that. So my one recommendation would be, if you have all of the different things that are maybe new to you, maybe you can focus on a certain topic. Maybe for your local community, there's great open data, like for Cologne, that helped me a lot. And Nicola, you mentioned maybe just have a few data sets and not try to kind of start with every day new, wonder what is your data set, what is your topic, and then maybe also need to kind of learn how to do that stuff technically. So I felt that was helping me with the start, and I still try to kind of focus on certain topics. Again, I have lots of experience now from the challenge, but it's basically the only time of the year when I create maps that excessively, so to say. So it's still something that is new each year for me.
And I think that another kind of part of this challenge is that you don't have to make them in November. It's when you publish them. So it can be showing the portfolio of work you've done through the course of the year, or if you want to do it for next November, let's say, coming in November this year, you can start now and get the kind of work underway. But I think that sense of having either some constraints or some focus is certainly a very useful coping mechanism, rather than treating these as 30 very distinct projects in and of themselves. But it also means that the portfolio of work you create has a nice sort of thread running through it in terms of the themes or the topics. And we'll start off with the first of our selections, which is yourself, Ansgar, looking at the third day. So the third day was the theme around polygons. So for each of these, we're just going to ask you just sort of share a few insights into what is it you made, why did you make that, and any of the kind of bumps and bruises along the way that we don't appreciate you went through in the final work.
So first of all, I noticed in preparation that I really benefited from creating alternative text for my maps when I share them.
Okay,
so I can now, I don't have to point at things that people are not seeing if they listen to the podcast audio. So what it shows is an isochrone map, and they're like the map of Cologne in 4 different sections. And these isochrones, they typically show the time that you need to travel from one point to another. And what I displayed on that map is how long it basically takes from any place in Cologne to get to the next secondary school in Cologne. And there are 6 different categories of time that you travel from less than 2 minutes. Now looking at it, I think maybe if you need less than 2 minutes by bike, you walk. But anyway, up to more than 30 minutes. It's something actually personal. Again, it's Cologne, and it's also like friends of us, their son is in 4th grade, and in Germany, after 4th grade, you typically switch to secondary school. And then this time of the year in November, you are typically looking for which school to choose. And they talked about the challenges that they have, because where they live in Cologne, there's not kind of the you need some time to get to those secondary schools, and I thought, oh, maybe this is something I could visualize. And I'm not going to dive too much into the different types of secondary schools. So in Germany, one of the challenges was to kind of, given that I produce everything in English, for the challenge to kind of have a translation
Right.
to explain what it means. So, for example, the German gymnasium is not a gym, but it's
Yeah.
the grammar school.
Yeah.
So I try to come up with proper descriptions of these school types so that are hopefully understandable for people not familiar with a German secondary education system. And yeah, actually, what it reveals is that especially for grammar schools, so the highest level of secondary education, um, there is a clear distinction between the western or the left side of the River Rhine and what is right of the riverbed, and which I found striking. But if you are familiar with Cologne, it's not surprising that kind of there's a difference, and actually it also shows that where our friends live, it takes some time to get to the next school. So it's kind of really intriguing, and again, like related to what I'm exposed to here in Cologne, so I can also make sense of what I create in the end, right? Does it really make sense? Is the River Rhine somehow considered or not?
Yeah.
And all of this stuff is really important again, so that because I publish it, I also feel responsible that it's like I'm 90% sure it's correct at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, really benefited from like an open data set again of the schools in Cologne and all of their addresses and the school types that they are. And again, I used R to do the data processing to calculate basically these travel times, which was something that I think I did once the year before, but I was again always fascinated by other people's work doing this kind of stuff. So I tried to come up with my own version with a topic that I can relate to. And yeah, I think like the final polishing I did in Figma, arranging these different maps, adding annotations. Typically, I try to do this in R when I create charts, but with maps, it's sometimes like I tend to get kind of too detailed in where to place annotation,
Yeah.
and it gets a bit more challenging for me as well, at least with maps. So I sometimes take like the easy way out and use something like Figma to finalize.
Finesse the appearance, yeah, and I think that's a typical workflow that many people will use a tool to make the charts or the maps in this case, and then some other tool to sort of fine tune the appearance and the layout and add the annotations. And it's nice that it was also a piece of work that was useful to you and your friends, and maybe advising where to move house to in the next instance. But what I like about this as well, especially, is I like the small multiples, so you've not overloaded one map with too much information. You can split them out into 4 panels, but also the sense that we've got this central question that then this work attempts to provide some answer to, which is always a very good piece of practice. I also find it interesting what you talk about there, even though this is a relatively sort of trivial exercise in practicing mapping, you still had that sense of responsibility for the accuracy to the extent you could control that. And so it's still a recurring pressure to make sure these things are right, even though it's published for something that's not a real piece of news journalism that's going to go out to the world. But now, from yourself, Ansgar, to Nicola's first piece, which is what was day 7, looking at the topic of accessibility. And this is accessibility, I suppose you could look at it from 2 perspectives: accessibility in sense of accessing terrain, which I guess is also a theme in some ways, a bit stretched from Ansgar's first one. But you looked at it from a more sort of visual accessibility perspective. What was the sort of the motivation to sort of pursue that direction? And a very specific question, which is, why did you choose France?
very good question as to why I chose France.
It's a
And I
nice
wanted
shape, let's face it, as a
I
panel.
think that
Yeah.
might honestly have been the only
Yeah.
reason. So I was looking at sort of creating this square-ish grid, looking at sort of how a map looks when you simulate it under different types of color blindness. So I have a map of France, and they are randomly colored, so it's not actually showing any data
Yes.
about France. So it's 2, 3, 4, 7, or 10 different colors, and then what that looks like under three types of color blindness, and when it's desaturated, so when it's printed in black and white. And I think one of the reasons that I really wanted to look at this is a lot of people just use default color palettes. Like we love making charts and we love making maps, so we probably spend occasionally some more time than we perhaps should designing and sort of choosing colors. But a lot of people are making charts in a hurry and just using the defaults. So I wanted to sort of show, you know, this what can happen when you just rely on those default settings. And you know, if you're only using 2 colors, the default settings are okay. But even when you only go to 3 colors, which is it is a really small number, suddenly it's impossible to tell different categories apart, different areas apart. So you might think that your choices are good, or that the defaults are a good setting, but actually they're not good for everyone. So particularly things like maps, where you have choropleth maps, where color is the only way you're distinguishing categories.
Yeah.
It just looks like a sort of big grey sort of
Blob.
blur to some people, and so it's sort of a little bit of a grid to show people this is what it might look like, to give them that like visual explanation of how it looks to some people.
Yeah, and I mean, I think accessibility as a topic is very. It's always been relevant, but I think it's much more discussed and embraced, and I guess in some ways exposed at the moment, in terms of people will call out others if their work is not accessible. And I do feel that I've probably paid too much lip service to it over the years, in terms of if it's at least red, green, colorblind friendly. I feel good with myself. You know, I've made it accessible, but this reveals just how many variations of visual accessibility related impairments might exist. But it also goes beyond just how one perceives, but also how work is published and produced. So you think about print quality, you think about screen quality, think about light pollution. Like in my office right now, the blue skies are ruining the light of my podcast broadcast. But these are some of the subtleties of the physicality of the environment, as well as the visual perception. So I think it's a really nice and interesting take on the theme for this one. And again, once again, the use of a question as a title, I think, is a perfect way to set it up for the audience. Sticking with yourself, Nicola, for the next one, which is about air. And this is within the 30-day map challenge. There are certain themes that have a kind of repetition. This is under the classical elements sub-theme or section, and it says this is about focusing on the atmosphere, whether it's map weather, wind patterns, air traffic, pollution, blah blah blah. And you've gone for air pollution with this one, and looking at Bonfire Night, which, for the context of non-British people, this is the event that takes place on the 5th of November every year. There's bonfires and fireworks across the country, which naturally leads to air pollution. So over to you, Nicola. What's going on with this one?
So this one, I wanted to do something that was a little bit topical, I guess, but given that the map challenge is in November. So this was sort of 4 or 5 days after Bonfire Night, so it's sort of fresh in my head. And I think we all know that, you know, fireworks are bad for the environment anecdotally, but I wanted to see actually what does the data look like, how bad is it? And so there's a really nice R package to get air quality data from different monitoring stations across the UK. So I used that to get data on nitrogen dioxide, I think. And so I compared the day after Bonfire Night to the same day in the previous week to sort of get rid of any weekend effects. So it's 2 maps of the UK. So one the day after Bonfire Night and one the week before. And each little circle represents the level of nitrogen dioxide detected at that station. The size of the circle is, you know, the level. But I wanted to go a sort of stage further with this. So rather than just having lots of little dots, you can see, oh, there's more dots or they're bigger, to try and find a sort of threshold of, you know, air pollution is very bad if it's above this level, and highlight these are few locations that exceed that on both days. And what you see is the day after bonfire night, you have very clear exceedances of that threshold compared to the week before, where there's no big red dots. So it's sort of taking that, I guess, bubble map a stage further and adding that layer of, you know, even if you don't pay attention to what the dots are, what the sizes are, you can see there's six big red dots, and red dots seem bad compared to a map with nothing on it there.
Yeah, and it's the fire, you know, the colours are the kind of nighttime, the fire. And I think what's interesting about this is what you've not done as well, which is we don't have any labels of places. Were you tempted at all to add that layer of annotation, or did you feel that this almost sort of spoke for itself? It's not so much where as much as it happens in these places.
Yeah, I was tempted to add some more annotations, but it's quite a busy map already. So you got full map of the UK twice, dates, so a little bit context around those dates and some explanation. So I kind of left it somewhat intentionally blank with annotations, but where those 6 red dots are, you can, I think, if you're aware of UK geography, pick out which cities.
I'm going to guess Belfast, Glasgow, Leeds, Manchester, London, and then I'm not sure about the one in the sort of Northwest Midlands.
I'm not entirely sure either. But it's sort of, you can, even if you don't have those annotations, if you are familiar with it, you can see that and you think, okay, that's, you know, it's a city, that's where people are, there's going to be fireworks there. So I kept it somewhat intentionally minimal. But I think, it does sort of speak for itself a little bit.
It does. And I think the other thing as well, which is one of the reasons why I'm so in awe of people who do mapping so well, is that there are so many nuances about how one can interpret this. So, for example, you make the point in the footnotes that all we're seeing are the sites where data is recorded. These are not all the instances of bonfires or where you see no dots, there's been no issues. It's just where it's recorded. And, you know, putting a mark on a map is so powerful in terms of its implication of the where and its potential area that it implies it spreads. So that there are so many elements of responsibility that map makers have to take with these things, because people can misinterpret them very, very easily. So I think the care and attention that you've made with all the scaffolding of the explanations and the intro, I think is such an important aspect. You know, mapping is not just the maps, it's the words as well, as it is with all databases. Now, back to Ansgar, and we're on to day 11 now, which is the minimal map. So here again, Ansgar, you've gone for lines, but now we've gone beyond Cologne, and we're looking at the Roman Empire. What was it that led you towards looking at Rome for this one?
Oh, this is really serendipity. I stumbled upon a news piece in Nature. Somebody published the largest known data set of Roman Empire roads.
Right.
I think it was just released like 5 or 6 days before that topic came up. And I was fascinated by that again, because it's like there are certain geometrical forms, in this case lines, that in the end show something that is familiar, right? So what the map reveals is, based on all of these lines, smaller ones, larger ones, that are the known roads of the Roman Empire. And these researchers have added, like combining different methods, added lots of unknown roads, or compiled one data set from different sources. And when you plot all of these roads on a blank canvas, you suddenly see basically the Mediterranean region, right. So North Africa, and then of course Italy and Spain come up, France is there. You can see lots of roads leading to Paris.
There's just one in
And also,
Corsica, I think it is. This one little central road that
yeah,
goes
yeah,
through
I
Corsica.
was wondering about that as well.
Yeah,
Something is missing on that map, and then there's just
yeah,
one line, and okay, that's probably the one known road
yeah,
in the data set. But it all kind of comes to a familiar shape again by just
yeah,
plotting these roads. Yeah, you see basically I guess one of the largest extents of the Roman Empire, and where the Romans maybe didn't
mm,
go, right? Or at least they weren't able to build roads in the end. So it's also really interesting to see this extent, and in the end, it's really just based on the lines. I guess that was one of the maps that was easiest to produce because it just worked.
yeah, yeah,
It was just one off, and it was there. And yeah, thanks to this high resolution data set, which was already in the proper format to create it. It was just basically plotting it and then add a caption and maybe a title um, to show that it actually shows the
yeah,
roads of the Roman Empire, and which I think perfectly fitted to the minimal theme. There's just the black lines and a light colored background and
mm,
little text. I mean, as much text as needed to value the source and
yeah,
to explain what is visible. I think the title doesn't even need to be there, to be honest. Probably you would recognize that is something related to Roman Empire.
yeah, yeah,
And that's kind of, for me, really reflecting the topic of the minimal map.
yeah. And also, Rome is at the very center of the layout of this as well, which is, I think it's a fascinating example of, as you said, sort of serendipity of the data set becoming available. I think it would be interesting in a different world, sort of sliding doors, if you got access to that data set and it didn't turn out to be very good. And one of the things is that, what we've got there is a wonderful, as you say, it speaks for itself. It kind of reveals the shapes of the land masses themselves through the road networks. But you can also imagine a version where it didn't look very good. And I do wonder sometimes when we see incredible visualizations more broadly rather than maps. And we sometimes praise the visualization, sometimes often for good reason, but actually data is the star. And if the data is not of high resolution, not detailed enough, not quality enough, the database can only be so good thereafter. But I think this is a super piece. Now back to yourself.
Maybe just one, if I
Jump
may
into
interrupt,
yeah,
just one more highlight of why I chose this map as well. So it like a day after Alex Szymanskaya, I think is her name, approached me, wrote a message. Is it okay to kind of, I have this idea, can I use your R code and then
yeah,
produce something out of it? And she basically compared the known Roman road network to today's road network
okay,
and showed overlaps and created a new map where you can see, okay, these kind of along these travel paths, there's still a road or a new road to show how these networks maybe have stand through
mm,
time, basically, or have been important over time, which was really nice and like I felt a great extension of what I created. Again, my effort was like I read this article,
yeah,
I created this map very quickly, and then to see that somebody picks that up and makes a
yeah,
far more complex analysis, adding a new question, answering a new question based on the little piece of code that I wrote is really really great experience. And I also see something that you can really use if you want to participate in the challenge. I mean, look at what others are creating, and then people using R, Python, all of that code-based stuff. But there are also people who make great YouTube tutorials, how
mm,
they create maps with other tools that maybe are
mm,
not like code based. Um, And you can take that, I mean, of course, credit the original author and then make your own version. Take that
Absolutely.
map about this topic and produce something in a similar style. And it's such an opportunity to learn new stuff from my point of view. That is really one key element of the challenge for me.
100%. And I think with that, I mean, it's already part of the R community, the fact that you can share our script and others can jump on that and evolve it and take it forward, but also that curiosity that you've had that's taken this to this state that you got it to, and then others have thought, that's a great basis for me to then add my insight or like at least explore something else to get more insights. That's another sort of lovely byproduct of this process. Now, Nicola, we're back to the UK with we're on to day 22, so we've jumped a few days now, and this is the data challenge Natural Earth. So we've got a unique display and my bivariate, so that's the name it just came back to. It's a bivariate color palette, which is a rarely seen but very powerful way of showing two things simultaneously. Over to you, what's going on with this one, and what made you think about the rain? What possibly could make you think about the rain in Britain?
No idea what could make me think about the rain here. So for me, this was quite, I guess, a liberal interpretation of the prompt. So the prompt is to use the Natural Earth data sets. I did not, but I did use data about things that naturally happen on Earth.
Right.
So looking at elevation and rain. So earlier in the challenge, it actually made a sort of 3D map with ray shader looking at rainfall in the UK. So just your sort of univariate map. But when you look at that map, the first thing you sort of see, partly because it's 3D, but it just looks like an elevation map of the UK. So you sort of, how much do the rain and the hills correlate with each other? So I thought, okay, well, let's get data on elevation and map it to that rainfall data. It was quite tricky to join those two data sets together because they're sort of on completely different scales, different formats. And for every single little square in the UK, you want how far above sea level is it and how much rain was there here in the last year. So joining those two things together did take quite a bit of work. But then you can kind of plot it on this bivariate map. So sort of more red is higher elevation, more blue is more rain, and if you end up with this very dark purple color, it is both hilly and rainy.
Yeah.
And those sort of bivariate maps can be quite tricky. Sometimes it's quite hard to tell which corner of the legend you're in. But in this case, because rainfall and elevation correlate so much in the UK, it almost becomes univariate.
Yeah.
In the sense that okay, here's an area that's very flat with no rain, it's very pale. Here's all the dark areas where it's both rainy and hilly, and that's the overall sort of pattern. And then it's easier to pick out, okay, where's the unusual areas that are sort of flat and rainy or vice versa.
And I think that's again that I've often like you expressed there, I've often found bivariate colour schemes a tough thing to perceptually process, and I think it's something that you can easily dismiss as it's too hard, it's therefore bad. But no, I think if you persevere and sort of teach the lens almost what you're looking for, what not to look for. I mean, what I'm looking at here is actually more what you spoke to there, which is the exceptions, the bits where we only see red or the bits where we only see blue, because otherwise you kind of expect the correlation to exist in the higher areas with more rain. So I think if you sort of train yourself to look at almost pockets of that 9-panel color scheme one at a time, that's when you really start to see the stories. Now, you spoke there about the rigors of the sort of data kind of combining or handling, which I guess is another subplot / benefit of this process, which is to fine tune your data processes behind the scenes. What we see in terms of the design choices here and the final work here, what fraction of the overall duration on this task would that represent? I guess it's probably at least 2/3 hidden work, 1/3 design work at the end.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this map, more so than others in the challenge, took a long time with sort of data processing and just accessing that data in the first place. And it's one of the things I guess you don't see when people are sharing things on social media and you're sort of very inspired by things. You don't know how long they've spent on that. You don't know if they already had the nice data.
Yeah.
So it's
I mean, that's why I did this whole podcast, because I wanted to bring out the hidden stuff to the surface. Yeah.
Yeah. So for some, days of the challenge, you've used the data before, so it's been pre-processed. So, even if you put those constraints up, I only want to spend an hour on it, and you've got an hour on design, there's going to be other days where if you want to put an hour on it, it might be 55 minutes running the data and then 5 minutes to make a map that you can post somewhere. So it's this one, I was never completely happy with this map because it's each point on the map is actually a tiny little square. So it started out as raster data, so none of the squares sort of overlap, but actually I had to resize all of the squares to get them to sort of line up to actually make a kind of map, just because the data sets were in such different formats. It made it really tricky. It's very high resolution data, so you can't really tell that when you're looking at the map, but it always annoys me a little bit that underneath the hood it was actually little squares and there might be a tiny little bit of overlap between them.
So this needs to be blown up to a huge poster, really, to experience the full pain that you've gone through, which I think comes across in what you sort of sharing in this reflection. No, I think it's a lovely piece. I think it's one of the most successful bivariate colour schemes and plots I've seen, so that's great stuff. Now we're over to day 24, and Ansgar, this is about places and their names, focusing on toponymy.
It also, like the minimalistic map, it goes into that direction of, by using little elements, in this case, the names of all German municipalities, you end up with the shape of the country, more or less, that is everyone is familiar with. And this one is an animated map. So it basically plots each municipality one after the other. It starts with Berlin as the largest city in Germany, then it's Hamburg, Munich, Cologne, and all of these well-known cities, they are placed on the map one after the other. And then I finally sped it up, like going into hundreds and thousands of municipalities to be added. Finally, there are about 11,000 in Germany. And all of them are in that final frame of the animation when you can see the shape. I mean, you can already see it from like 1,000 municipalities. You notice what it is, the latest, I guess. So there are interesting patterns that you can see during the process. So, I mean, first of all, you get all these more or less known locations, I would say, of the bigger cities, somewhere where they are on the map. Then you have these metropolitan areas like the Ruhr area, where the larger cities are very close to each other. You notice these. Then you have some other urban areas that come up, and then finally, like in the last 1 or 2 seconds of the processing, you see a large wide area in the southwest of Germany. That's Rhineland-Palatine, where they have like a very special for German administrative organization, very special situation. So I said there are like 11,000 municipalities in Germany in total, and 22% are in this rather like average sized in size, in area, and in population. They have so many there. So in the end, there's kind of a very wide area on that part of the map, which is again something, to be honest, I wasn't aware of, and I learned from that animation. And even though there's not too much kind of analytical value, I guess there are some things that come up, some more known, right? You maybe know, at least if you live in Germany or nearby, you know Ruhr area and you know where Berlin is and maybe Hamburg. But all of these little details that came up like in the very end, and this was again like just plotting certain elements on a blank canvas and then finding out patterns through this process of animation. I mean, it would have been kind of a very just blurry thing if I just printed all of the 11,000 names on that canvas. But I think with doing this animated process, it reveals these patterns that I mentioned.
Absolutely. I think it's a fascinating piece again that similar to the Roman roads work, it kind of the shapes emerge, as you said, out of the data shape in the but without labels, without axes, without scales. It's just something that through the sheer intensity and the volume of labels, you get that shape. And I think you're right. Sort of halfway through the animation, you get this, or maybe sort of 2/3 towards the end, you get this sort of deluge of white emerging. I mean, you said it's an animation, which I think it works terrifically well. Were you ever thinking that it could be, I don't know, sort of small multiples, for example? Here, the first 100, next 100, or did you just experiment with animation and you felt that that just showed something to you, and therefore it probably shows something to others?
I think I had this idea very early on that I just placed the names on the map, and I thought, okay, if I start with everything, as I just said, it would be too much. I didn't think about the small multiples, which would be kind of the static equivalent to this animation. Maybe I will try it out. So one of the things of the challenge is also like you can come back to what you did and maybe just use this as an idea for the next map next year. Or something that you notice and maybe are eager to change at some point. It's a very good idea. And one thing that's also important here, I think, also like with the Roman roads, it's good that kind of like even though there are differences in population density in Germany, which is again like reflection of where the municipalities then are located, it works quite well in the end to kind of see the country shape. The funny thing is, I published it on Blue Sky, and I think like 3 hours later, somebody created their version. I also shared the code, and somebody used the code to create their version of the same topic for Sweden. And for Sweden, you have like the bigger municipalities. They're rather in the south, and then you have this north, which is not very, or which is sparsely populated. I think it also worked quite well, but they thought, okay, maybe some more populated places in the north of Sweden would help as well. But again, it was really fascinating. Somebody picking up that idea just within really like 3 hours. Was fascinating.
And actually that was going to be my next observation, which is it would be fascinating to see it applied to a country where there is such a diversity of population centres. I'm thinking Australia, Canada, these kind of classic places where you often see how much of a struggle it is in things like political analyses, where you just don't have this even spread. So similar to the Roman roads piece, where we saw the absence as much as the presence, it would also sort of echo that effect in those areas. So, but it's nice to see that someone's done that already and so rapidly. We now move on to day 25, and this is something that we're looking at both your works. And as I said, we kind of curated as many distinct days as possible. But for this, we wanted to look at the same approach, and this is hexagons. So we'll come to you first, Ansgar, just in terms of your hexagon map. So the method or the theme here is to use hexagonal binning, hex bins, or a grid system to visualize your data. So once again, we're in Germany. What's the gist of your piece for this one?
So this map shows so first of all, the map is translated, as you said, in these hexagon bins. And this is kind of the canvas. And then each hexagon is filled by color to show the percentage of people aged 15 to 24. And that title is like, where's the youth? And dark color means a comparably low share of young people. And the lighter colors, the brighter colors, they identify areas where there's a higher share of younger people in that age bracket. like 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was actually one of these data challenges in the map challenge, like the natural Earth thing that Nicola mentioned, and there was one challenge for one data set, or a collection of data sets, that when I found like there's a very fine granular map of basically every country in the world with the population and some estimates for the population in different age groups.
Mm.
And I experimented with that, I think in challenge 24, 23, and now I thought maybe I revisit that data and make something that hopefully works with that theme of the challenge, the hexagons as well. And
Because it really brings out the sort of former East and West Germany split, which is a surprising artifact of that. Was that
yeah, I
something
think
that you
I'm
were
adding.
expecting?
Yes, and I think I'm adding like to the catalog of maps showing this kind of don't want to call it divide, but these
Mm.
kind of differences in various metrics and factors. But I also, I mean, kind of Germany reunification maybe is one topic, and two separate states until 1990 is one driver. But I think there are some more factors, because on the map there are also centers in the area of the former uh, Democratic Republic of Germany, as it was called, which are kind of the major cities like Leipzig and
Yeah.
Dresden, where people are moving
Yeah.
to study for job opportunities. So it's not like east and west divide, so to speak, but it's also like rural versus urban.
Yeah.
Like all the many young people moving to these centers, and then leaving behind like an aging population.
Yeah.
And it's also, there are many factors like effects from the reunification, people in the 1990s moving to west of Germany, and birth rates that were very low in these states that joined the republic. So it's different factors, I think, that are at play here. And I feel like I could have explained that in the map even better, because of course it like is this similar. You see like, oh yeah, that is more or less the shape of the former GDR, and that is Western Germany. But I think there are more factors at play 35
Yeah.
years after reunification.
Absolutely. And you're not trying to do a piece of sort of social explanation. It is just the map. But I do think it's a nice piece that sort of stirs and triggers conversation about why is that a thing, and obviously this would then lead on to other maps that then pinpoint which cities are which, and the migration stories within the countries. It's a beautiful piece, and contrasting that where it's very data driven, very much something that you could use to draw insights, to Nicola's where you've had a bit of fun, Nicola, with this one. I think you've let yourself off the handbrake has been released for this one. So I'll let you describe this to our especially to our listeners. But let me open with the question which you've posed, which is, what do the letters O, Q, W, X, and Y have in common? Go ahead.
So for this map, for the hexagon prompt, I've created a grid map of the world where every country is represented by a colored hexagon rather than the sort of more traditional square or rectangle. And as you say, this is one of the maps that I've created that the final output is probably not something particularly useful or indeed interesting with the terms of patterns, but it was kind of an opportunity to experiment a little bit and sort of look, it's not just about learning code or learning maps, it's kind of an opportunity to try out things that work. And I guess the reason that I ended up making this map was that I actually made it when I was on a train without any Wi-Fi. So I had those sort of constraints on me that I had to use, only software that I already had installed, and data that already existed on my laptop. So I thought, okay, what can I make that's vaguely hexagon related? So there's an R package, GeoFacet, that gives you grid layouts, and I thought, okay, that gives you that nice layout for the countries. I can write a function that draws a hexagon. I'm going to color these hexagons, and what am I going to color them in with? And I thought, okay, there's the only sort of thing that was immediately to hand was the ISO codes for countries. So they are colored based on the first letter of the ISO code for each country. And obviously there's 26 letters in the alphabet. So when you end up with this color scale that has 26 values in it, the sort of default, and I think many things give you this sort of rainbow color palette. And if you go, okay, like what countries begin with, like, I don't know, the letter R, it's you're trying to look at a very specific shade of turquoise and compare it to
which
a
could be
slightly
S or
different
it could
shade.
be
It could be
P.
absolutely
Yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So it becomes really difficult. So I thought, okay, like I'm going to use color to encode things. Is there another way of encoding data into colors that doesn't result in this very sort of difficult to tell apart color scheme? So I ended up using the outline color of the hexagon in combination with the sort of fill color of the hexagon to create combinations. So rather than using 26 colors, you can use 5 colors. That gives you, with the combination of sort of outline and fill, gives you 25 colors plus an extra one. You have 26. So it's not necessarily particularly easy to look at, but if you do want to find a particular value and look something up, it's much easier compared to
I used it almost as a
26
quiz,
color.
actually. I used it as a puzzle. And I was looking at it in preparation. I thought, I actually spent almost as much time on this as any others, but going, right, I reckon that must be France and that must be Germany. And I sort of decoded it. So it's almost like a fun puzzle exercise as much as an informative piece.
Yeah.
But no, it's a lovely. And I think it's an interesting challenge that, as you said, about the distinct number of colours. And, you know, we often talk about colour theories in data viz, but so much of it does lead back to mapping techniques, cartography techniques. But in this case, the kind of combination of the sort of central colour with the outline stroke as a combination, as a pair, I think is a very nice solution to overcome the lack of distinctions that are otherwise available with a single colour. So it's a fun piece, and if you're not watching this episode, I would definitely urge you to check it out and try and get as many as you can. But just to close off, the reason for the title, the letters O, Q, W, X, and Y are used as the first letters for only one country each. I won't tell you the answers. You're going to have to go and look at the work to get the answers of those. Super. So 2 more left. Back to you, Ansgar, for day 28, where we're looking at simply black.
A lot less colors in that, if colors at all. But this is one of the categories where I feel like they have lots of, you can bring in lots of ideas, right? It's just the one word, and you can make a lot of things out of that. And my connection was coal. And again, it's kind of a bit of personal, because where I grew up, that's the area that is depicted on the map. So the Ruhr area, where you have like Dortmund in the east, and Essen and Duisburg in the south, and Recklinghausen in the north. You learn a lot about coal in primary school already. And I got hold of this digitized map that was, it's really a series of maps that was created in the early 1950s to locate the different coal seams in the Ruhr area. And there are lots of maps, and in the digitalized form, they are combined to each other. So a coal seam is like a natural formed horizontal layer of coal formed over millions of years, and has been exploited in that area for centuries, right? Like in the 1300s, they found kind of the first coal somewhere, and then it became really like the number one energy source, and also the number one economic source of that Ruhr area, until it peaked in the 1950s, when this map data was created, actually. Like there were almost 500,000 people in that area working in coal mines and similar functions. And then it declined, and I think the last coal mine closed like 8 years ago, something like that. So like really spanning a long history, and also like has transform that area. This decline of coal mining in the Ruhr area has been kind of a topic from like the 60s or 70s until the 2010s, and is still kind of part of the transformation of that area. And as I said, like from the beginning in school, I learned about it. I visited a coal mine, so it was also again kind of a personal thing. And in this map, you see really these locations of these coal seams, how they have been at least tracked and stored in that old map material, and was then digitized and is available as data to print. And I try to kind of mimic with fonts, for instance, font choices, kind of a bit of an old school vibe to it. I added some annotations to describe what it means. I mean, I had to look up the English word for the German word flöz, which is kind of describing what it is, and I try to kind of explain a bit why it is important, has been important for that area. Again, it's kind of rather minimal, and it's, I guess,
but it looks like coal. It looks like coal looks with the sort of light shimmering.
The shape is as well, right? It's kind of benefiting. Again, I'm lucky with kind of the data that I found and how it finally ends up on the canvas. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely piece. I think it's a perfect selection for the theme of black. Wonderful stuff. Thank you, sir. So, on to your final selection, Nicola, which is raster. You've touched on rastering as a method for the UK elevation and ray map, but now we're looking at the other side of the world and Australia.
So this is a map of elevation of Australia. And I want to start by saying this is heavily inspired by some of the work that R.J. Andrews did a few years ago. So I'd seen him make maps of elevation using a typewriter.
That's right, yeah.
So where each sort of letter, the ink density of each letter gives you that elevation. So I wondered whether you could do something similar using R, but with that same sort of typewriter styling. So I sort of managed to grab some elevation data. So I had this grid of elevation. And then I sat down with some font menus, so looking for some typewriter style fonts and going through letters and trying to pick out a few that have different ink densities among them. So I think I picked out 4 different letters of the alphabet, sort of ranging from like the letter L, which has very low ink, up to M or W. And then you can represent each sort of little raster square, the elevation, with a letter rather than, I guess, a color or a shade. And you don't really see the letters at all when you zoom all the way out, when you take that sort of
I didn't even know that they were letters. That's
all you see is this elevation map that sort of looks, grey, sort of black and white, and it's only when you zoom right in you can actually see each individual letter. And it depends a little bit on the grid size you use, how abstract it becomes, how much it looks just like a map versus with the letters. But it was a really fun one to make because it makes very nice wall art, which is another sort of aspect of the sort of 30-day map challenge, is making things that aren't just useful but are kind of nice and
beautiful artifacts.
Aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it has a very similar sort of vibe to Ansgar's coal one in terms of the font, the look and feel. But I think it's another demonstration from many of the pieces we've looked at, which is using different materials to find a way to depict data and to depict place. So whether it's words, whether it's letters, whether it's points, whether it's shapes. And we can see Australia very clear there, but as you said, it'd be a super piece to have as another A1 print. You're gonna have to get some print budget for these works, I think, Nicola. But that's wonderful. So those are your respective selections of 5s. I asked you also to close off to pick 2 works of others that you were particularly impressed with or inspired by. Nicola, you picked one from day 16, for which the theme was cells, something composed of small discrete units or networks.
Yeah, so I absolutely loved this map when I saw it. So it's a map of surface water in the UK. and each sort of grid cell with the amount of surface water is represented by a sort of little raindrop style. And I guess there are two reasons why I love this map. First of all, it is very minimalist. It's sort of very clean. I don't love minimalism for the sake of minimalism, but I think it's really effective here. The other reason I love this map is because the sort of styling and the theming of the map matches the topic of the data. So it's a map about surface water. So you have
surface water,
and it's so effective because your brain sort of understands the map and what's going on before you actually think about it or read the text or really see it. You know instinctively what it's a map of. So it's very aesthetic, but it's also very effective. And I think it's a really nice combination of those two things for me.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a really nice selection. That was produced by Steve Fay Embra, which, if I know my Scottish, is Steve from Edinburgh. But yeah, it's a lovely piece. As you said, it is minimalist, but not through some kind of obscure desire. But it's all you need to depict surface water in Great Britain. So yeah, that's a lovely choice. And then Ansgar, your final choice is another map based on words and place names.
It's a map created by Alessandro Medina, and so the topic was makeover, and he actually changed a map he created earlier to, I think, an even more powerful one. So it's a map of Europe, like in the familiar shape of the continent, and adding the things that you know, but rather of using like the typical elements of a topographic map. All the shapes are made by typography, right? So the land masses, they are formed by the major city names, and they are also more or less located to their actual location. As another layer, the city names, they are written in the local language, which I think also gives this understanding of culture as well, and cultural diversity in Europe, and then finally the water, the seas are also named by the names of the seas, and I really think this is such a creative idea. And why is it makeover? The original map used lorem ipsum text to kind of form the land masses and the water bodies. But here I think it's really next level, placing all of these names and finding names that also then fit like smaller shapes. So like I caught my eye, you have like Sicily, and it's Cagliari. It's only like written in 2 lines, for instance, to kind of resemble the shape of Sicily, and or like 3 place names in Iceland, for instance, to kind of come up with that shape, and not just Reykjavik. Really, really fascinating. And again, you have also like different languages and different alphabets as well, to show the diversity of the continent.
That's and that's another piece where I think you can only just imagine the amount of rules that were designed into the data preparation. You know, if word is of this length, then shorten it to this number of letters, but not this short. So that the amount of thinking that's gone into it, I think, is incredible. But you're right, the final work, I mean, I can only imagine when Alexander made this, there must have been a joyful moment of, oh, it's worked. Look at that. That is Europe, and these are all the places that you expect. So once again, another lovely choice. We've reached the end of your 5+1s, respectively. So closing things off, and I should say to everyone watching or listening, we'll put links to all these works in the show notes at the end. But just reflecting on the challenge of this particular year, 2025, but also in general, I'll come to you first, Nicola. You know, how was it for you? What are the things that you kind of drew from it from your own work, but perhaps of what you saw being created by others? What are your sort of headline reflections?
I think for me, this year, the challenge, I really wanted to focus on like doing fun things. And I think I made quite a few maps that I learned a lot about, data processing or writing functions or writing code behind it. you might end up with a map that's quite simple or quite fun, or in many cases not necessarily that useful. But the sort of learning process behind it was really useful for me. So I think that for me, that it's not always about creating the absolute best map or the best design, or focusing just on the design. It's about the other things you can learn as well at the same time. So that was really key for me, I think.
And I think also that there is that extra confidence that comes from just putting work out there, having a public portfolio of work to demonstrate your sensibility, or demonstrate your thought process or your flair. And as you said, it might not be that all 30 works end up being, world-class pieces, but you've tried something, you've learned something as a process. Ansgar, I guess similar sort of reflections from yourself?
I can really relate to what Nicola just said.
Yeah.
And also, so the years before, I was always able to kind of create some maps in the very already in October when the prompts are published. This time I really started November 1st, and so I wasn't kind of eager to kind of get to a maximum number of maps, but as you said, Nicola, have fun with it, and also again like be responsible of what you put out. I think because especially maps, and that's I think different to charts. In these maps, you have like this "you are here" thing, right? And you publish something that somehow relates to at least one person's situation,
Yeah.
and it somehow affects how you choose wording, color,
Yeah.
whatever elements you can put in there. So I also felt like, okay, I'm not going to put everything out that I create, and I have some things that I abandoned at some point. I didn't publish because I felt like I'm not really sure, or I don't have enough confidence in the accuracy and of the product. But still, I was able to learn stuff, right? And maybe next year is an opportunity where up until November, so this year, November 26, I have the opportunity to take that code. Again,
Yeah.
that's kind of one of the benefits of using something like R. You can just take that code next year and then create something new out of it. And it was important for me, right? I still learn about stuff. I still have some topics that I lack background information, and I felt like, okay, I need more time. It's not like a matter of, oh, this is the day now. This is the topic of the day. I need to push it out at some time. I also felt it was okay to kind of publish a day later or something if it was needed, right? So I feel like the challenge, you need to make the challenge that is the challenge for yourself, right?
Yeah.
It can be the number of charts that you create, get all the 30 maps, or get a certain number of charts, accomplish that, or learn new stuff. You can basically kind of, from my point of view, design the challenge for yourself and take these prompts as an inspiration.
Yeah. Get out of it what you want to get out of it. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you both ever so much for going through your wonderful works and for illuminating us in terms of what the 30-day map challenge looks like. I might give it a go this year. I might do it in the shadows, and then maybe next year I'll come out into the wild. But that's been wonderful. Thank you both so much, and thank you to all the viewers and listeners, and see you again soon for another episode of Explore Explain. Bye for now.
To see more information about today's episode, including some links to key sites and resources mentioned, please visit my website at visualizingdata.com. Here you'll also be able to find details about my book, information about my public and private training courses, as well as over a decade of blog posts. If you've enjoyed this series, please consider liking, subscribing, and spreading the word. See you next time.